No, it's always different. I mean, the truth is, I pretty much live like an infant these days, so I don't think about any practical stuff. My wife, as you know, is responsible entirely for me being here because I never could have figured out Skype. But it's the same with paying bills, going to the grocery store. She does all that kind of stuff, and so mostly I just sit around drawing this stuff and thinking about this stuff. So everything I read goes into the back of my head, and all those pieces. As I read things, I go, "Oh, I like that bit. I like this bit." Every movie I see, I kind of go, "Oh yeah, I kind of like to do something like that." And so all those scraps of information just drift around in my head and bang into each other. And out of that, some of them turn into stories. I did a story recently with Richard Corbin that was really interesting because I had no idea for the story. And usually even now, I've got 5 or 6 stories in my head that are kind of ready to go. They need a little polishing, a little research, but they're sitting there waiting their turn to come out. But I wanted to do something. I've always wanted to do something that was set in the Appalachian Mountains. And I knew, since I was talking to Richard about doing something, I knew he'd be perfect for that. These kind of, rustic hillbilly characters and these old rotting cabins and things. So I knew he was perfect for that, but I didn't have a story. A guy named Manly Wade Wellman had written stories, these supernatural stories about the Appalachian Mountains. So I wanted to do something inspired by that, but I needed to do my research. And fortunately, I've got a big library, and I'd accumulated a couple books on Appalachian folktales. So I sat down, and I've never done a story like this. I just sat down and started going through the book, and just circling this bit and circling that bit, and it was kind of like, witch balls. Coming across a formula for how to make witch balls and what witch balls do, and another specific thing about how you become a witch in Appalachian folk tales, and all those little bits. And the story I ended up writing wasn't taken from any particular story. The framework of it was mine, but the information, the authentic folklore touches came first. Usually it's the other way around. Usually I've banged together some kind of a skeleton of a story, and then I'll do my research to flesh that out. But it was a fun way to work. I actually wouldn't mind doing a couple other stories like that. And I've been compiling this library for years specifically for that reason, so I can say, okay, I haven't done anything set in Italy. Let me pull out a book of Italian folktales and just start reading and circling bits.
And actually, speaking of your shelves and everything, every artist has these little things that are on the shelf. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a little statue, something that's very interesting, that might have been given to them or things like that. Do you have anything around that you can maybe show the audience?
Well, you saw the Tooth Fairy. I'm not a toy guy, okay. So I don't have that kind of stuff. It's really not that interesting. It's just big piles of books. I have, over here, I have the books that changed my life as a kid. I've got all the Frank Frazetta books, Arthur Rackham, that kind of stuff. But most of what's in the studio is photo reference and all the folklore, my folklore library.
Okay. Okay, with all the folklore and everything, do you travel a lot? I always wondered that. To actually go.
Yeah, I love the idea that. Yeah, I love the idea that people think I do that stuff, but it comes from growing up and spending all my time in Berkeley and used bookstores. And when I was in Portland, I lived a couple blocks from the best used bookstore in America, Powell's. So 99.9% of the stuff that I've written about came from used bookstores. Probably 100%. I mean, when I was in Prague, I'd love to say that I, visited archives and, with a candle went down into the sub-basement, went down into the sewers, but it wasn't to look for reference. That's ghastly location scouting. No, it's all book learning.
So you collect books. Do you collect art as well?
I a little bit. I accumulate art. Mm-hmm. I'm not a major art collector. I've got a few pieces that I'm pretty proud of. You'll never see me hang my own artwork on the wall. I'm not one of those guys. But I've got a really nice Jeff Jones painting in the other room that is one of those painters I'd always wanted. But mostly I'm a book guy.
Okay. Now, who are some of your favorite artists and illustrators alive today, and what aspects do you find intriguing about them? Do you have any?
Well, yeah, and a few of them are still alive. Frazetta was the first one. I mean, when I don't know how old I was when I discovered the Frazetta stuff, but that was it. That secured what I wanted to do. I think, when I was reading comics, I was a fan of comics, but no particular artist. But Frazetta really, there was something there. So I wanted to, from the time I discovered Frazetta, I wanted to be that guy. And then I wanted to be Bernie Wrightson. A big book came out on Bernie Wrightson, and I must have copied that thing cover to cover. So I wanted to be Bernie Wrightson. Then after that, I kind of wanted to be a bunch of different guys. I wanted to be Arthur Rackham for 2 days. I wanted to be Brian Froud for a week. I wanted to be, it was actually very confusing, but really good, because it broke me from being a imitator of any one particular guy. Jeff Jones, I mentioned a second ago, I'm a huge fan of Jeff Jones. The guys I think that influence me the most are shape guys, mm-hmm. and that's a lot of painters, guys that have a really great, powerful silhouette and a certain abstract quality to their stuff. The real polished stuff doesn't really do much for me, but a guy like Van Gogh, a guy like I'm terrible with names. But you know what I mean, shape guys, silhouette guys feel an outline to the work. N.C. Wyeth, a huge influence to me, just because of the way he handled shapes and the fact that if a guy was standing on a rock, and Jeff does this too, when a guy's standing on a rock, the shadow of the guy glues him to the rock. It wasn't about the shoe and the shoelaces and stuff. It was about power and structure and solidity, so that kind of stuff really made a gigantic impression, which is, I'm sure, why to this day, when I'm drawing comics, I cannot draw a guy standing on the floor unless there's a shadow gluing the guy to the ground. Otherwise, to me, he looks like he's floating in the air.
Huh. And, speaking of styles, you get this question so many times. I get it too, but what's your opinion about, how should people start developing their styles? What's the route that you would suggest to them?
Well, I think what's worked for me is, like I just said, to not focus entirely on one guy, mm-hmm. because there's nothing worse than people going, well, we can't get Jim Lee, and we can't get the second, third, fourth, or fifth best Jim Lee imitator, but we'll keep going down the list till we get to you, because you're the 32nd best Jim Lee imitator, and you're available and we can afford you. To me, there was a period there where I was a Frazetta imitator, and there was a period there where I was a Bernie Wrightson imitator. Fortunately, most of that stuff's not in print, and I think also I was a bad imitator of those guys. And